Over the past decade or so, we have seen how much the running game, and running backs in general, have been devalued in the sport of football. The phrase, running backs don't matter, has been shouted to the heavens endlessly as analysts attempt to point out how less efficient running the ball is than passing it, in addition to how replaceable individual running backs are, and why teams should not waste valuable assets acquiring one. For the most part, these ideas have proven to be true, with countless examples of highly valued backs being outperformed by their lowly touted backups, and with even the most productive stars barely being net positives efficiency-wise. However, in the early 2010s there was one exception. One running back who not only lapped the running back field in all efficiency metrics, but also outperformed his QB's efficiency numbers, even while said passer was in the midst of a Pro Bowl season. Jamaal Charles of the Kansas City Chiefs was one of the best players to ever play the position of running back. But because of how much people weight longevity over peaks, he will unfortunately never sniff the Pro Football Hall of Fame. The numbers he put up in such a short period of time are mind-boggling, and new age advanced analytics only serve to further showcase his utter dominance. When other running backs across the league were being phased out, Charles proved that he mattered more than any other running back this century. When Charles entered the league, he was ahead of his time. Back then, he was viewed as just a scat back, and teams preferred the more natural bell cow running backs like Darren McFadden and Jonathan Stuart, who were two of 8 running backs selected before Charles, who went in the middle of the 3rd round of the 2008 NFL Draft. Sitting behind Larry Johnson, Charles didn't see much action as a rookie, but he did flash when given a chance, as he averaged 5.3 yards per carry on his 67 rush attempts. Even still, Kansas City refused to let Charles loose, even as Johnson performed as the worst starting tailback in the NFL in 2009, averaging a league-worst 2.9 yards per carry on 132 attempts through 7 games. It wasn't until Johnson was suspended and subsequently released in November for off-field troubles that Charles got the spotlight, and thus occurred one of the most drastic season splits you will ever see. Through Week 9, the midpoint of the season, Charles had just 29 carries for 152 yards. He finished the year with 1,120 rushing yards, and he did so on only 190 carries. The only other player to rush for at least 1,100 yards in a season on fewer than 200 attempts was Lamar Jackson in 2019. Charles finished the season 11th in rushing yards, but merely 25th in rushing attempts, as his 5.9 YPC mark topped all runners. He rushed for 658 yards over the Chiefs' final 4 games, which is the 4th highest total over a team's final 4 games of a season in league history. His true breakout performance came in the last game of that stretch. On the road, Charles ripped the hearts out of the playoff hopeful Broncos, rushing for 259 yards and 2 scores on over 10 yards apiece. That still stands as the 8th highest single-game rushing yardage total ever. Alas, even with this spectacular play, the Chiefs refused to fully commit to Charles. In the 2010 offseason, they signed free agent Thomas Jones, who was coming off of a 1,400-yard, 14-TD career year with the Jets. While Charles didn't fully revert to a backup role, he did play second fiddle to Jones, despite clearly outperforming him in every way. Jones started 10 games to Charles' 6, and he received 245 carries to Charles' 230. One of these players averaged 3.7 yards per carry, while the other averaged 6.4. I don't think I have to tell you which was which. For the second consecutive year, Charles led the league in yards per rush, and his 6.4 mark was also better than the Chiefs' 5.85 net yards per pass attempt for the season. Charles also bested Chiefs passers in this mark in both the previous year, 2009, and in his next healthy season 2 years later in 2012. But both of those teams were horrid with just as bad QB play. 2010 is notable, however, because that was when Matt Castle made the Pro Bowl with a 27-7 TD to int ratio, and the Chiefs won the West. And yet still, Kansas City was better off handing the ball to Jamaal Charles than doing anything else offensively. And this was 2010, after the first passing boom had already happened. His 6.4 yards per attempt was the second best for a running back on at least 150 carries in a single season, behind only Jim Brown in 1963. In fact, Charles' 2009 season also ranks 9th all-time on said list. Charles finished the season with 1,467 rushing yards, which was second in the NFL, earning a first-team All-Pro spot. Charles gave the Chiefs an early 7-3 lead in the playoff game against the Ravens, with a 41-yard scoring run, but he only saw 8 carries otherwise, as Kansas City could not sustain any offense with the passing game. His 2011 season was short-lived as he tore his ACL in a Week 2 matchup with Detroit and missed the rest of the year. But he came back as good as ever in 2012, though sadly his greatness went to waste, as the team surrounding him was worse than ever, as the Chiefs went 2-14 and earned the number 1 pick in the draft. But Charles rushed for a career-high 1,509 yards on yet again a sterling 5.3 yards per attempt mark. There was a lot of good running back play in 2012, so those numbers ranked him just 4th and 3rd in the NFL respectively. He helped Kansas City overcome a 24-6 deficit and earn their first win of the season on the road against New Orleans, as he rushed for 233 yards, including a career-long 91-yard touchdown in the third quarter, where he almost went untouched due to his speed and agility. He also caught 6 passes for 55 yards in the overtime win. That was the first of 2 200-yard games for Charles in 2012, as he also went off for 226 on just 22 attempts against the Colts in December, which again included a super long score, this time racing 86 yards to the house. That was the 3rd game of Charles' career with at least 220 rushing yards, which is tied with O.J. Simpson for the 2nd most in league history, and just 1 behind Jim Brown for the top spot. The Chiefs hired Andy Reid as head coach and traded for quarterback Alex Smith in 2013, thus bringing some stability to the franchise, allowing Charles to showcase his brilliance to a wider audience as the team returned to the postseason. He earned yet another first-team All-Pro award, as he was 3rd in the NFL with 1,287 rushing yards on 5 yards per carry yet again. He also did more in the scoring department as he led the NFL in rushing touchdowns at 12. But he really shined as a receiver in 2013, serving as Alex Smith's checkdown man. Charles led all Chiefs players in receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns, finishing with nearly 2,000 yards from scrimmage and 19 total touchdowns, which also led the league. He had one of the best games of his career against the Raiders when he rushed for 20 yards on 8 carries. Wait, what? Oh, right. I forgot to mention that he also caught 8 passes for 195 yards and scored 5 total touchdowns in the affair. 175 of those receiving yards came after the catch, as Charles ran laps around Oakland defenders all afternoon, with scoring plays of 1, 16, 39, 49, and 71 yards. He became the first and only player in NFL history to have 4 touchdown receptions and 1 rushing touchdowns in a single game. Charles' performance made him just the 2nd Chiefs player to score 5 touchdowns in a single game, with Abner Haynes being the first in 1961 when the team went by the Dallas Texans moniker. The game was one of just 16 5-score games in league history, and Charles' 195 receiving yards were the 7th most by a running back ever. Unfortunately for both Charles and the Chiefs, Charles' season still ended on a sour note, as he suffered a concussion after just 3 carries on the opening drive of Kansas City's heartbreaking postseason loss in Indy. Charles' box score stats suffered a bit in 2014, as he saw nearly 100 fewer touches than he did in the previous season, thanks to Knile Davis becoming the new Thomas Jones. But still, Charles went over 1,000 yards once again and was one of just 4 running backs to average 5 yards per carry. He had one of the most impressive games of his career against the defending champion Seahawks, rushing for 159 yards and 2 scores, making it clear who the best player on the field was that day, even while going against a star-studded defense featuring Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas, and Cam Chancellor. This was the 5th season of Charles' career in which he rushed for over 1,000 yards on 5 yards per attempt or better. That's tied for the most such seasons in league history, with only Barry Sanders and Jim Brown matching that total. Those are probably the 2 best running backs in NFL history, so pretty solid company. No other player even has 4 such seasons, and only 7 others have even done it 3 times. Along the way, Charles also became the Chiefs' all-time leading rusher, besting the old mark held by Priest Holmes. From 2009 to 2014, Charles had the 6th most rushing yards in football, but he averaged 5.5 yards per carry during that peak. Nobody else in the top 26 even hit an average of 5.0. Sadly, injuries took hold of Charles' career from here. He played well through 5 games of the 2015 season, including his first career game with 3 rushing TDs, but he tore his ACL in the other knee in Week 5 versus the Bears and was lost for the year. Come the next season, he never fully recovered from the torn ACL and suffered a setback with his knee, which required a second surgery to trim his meniscus. Charles' age 30 season, in which he saw just 12 carries, was the first of his career in which he averaged less than 5 yards per rush. He was released after the season, and after 2 cups of coffee with the Broncos and Jaguars, his career was over, as due to his lingering injuries coupled with his age, he could understandably never recapture his previous magic. He officially retired as a member of the Chiefs in 2019, taking one final ceremonial handoff from new quarterback Patrick Mahomes on the practice field. Just imagine the video game numbers that they would have put up if those two got to play together in their primes. But let's not get too sentimental here. Allow me to take it back now to put into context just how great Charles was, even with the super short career. Charles finished his career with the second highest yards per carry mark in NFL history among running backs with at least 750 carries. But to go further, Football Outsiders has 2 notable advanced statistics, DVOA and DYAR. In layman's terms, DYAR shows the total value a player brings to his team, adjusted for situation and opponent. In 2009, despite basically not playing until halfway through the season, Charles finished second to only Chris Johnson in his 2,000-yard season in DYAR. His career-high 382 in 2010 bested the league's leading rusher Arian Foster for number 1 in the NFL. Charles then had back-to-back third-place finishes in the stat in 2013 and in 2014. He led all players in rushing DYAR over the 6-year stretch from 2009 to 2014, even while including his 12-carry 2011 season. Football Outsiders has data for these stats going back to 1981, and only Emmitt Smith and Barry Sanders had more top 3 single-season finishes in DYAR than Charles's 4. It's a similar story with DVOA, which is the per-play version of DYAR. Charles had 2 second-place finishes in 2009 and in 2014, and he was 7th in 2013. But in 2010, his 32.9 mark was over 6 full points better than the second-place rusher. He is one of just 3 players since 1981 to have a rushing DVOA mark of at least 30% on 200 or more carries. Once again, only 2 players had more top 3 DVOA seasons than Charles, Barry Sanders and Priest Holmes. Charles really shines when we bring EPA, or expected points added, into the picture. In short, EPA per play shows how much a single play contributed to a team scoring points, using historical data to estimate. Charles led the NFL in the stat in 2009 with a staggering mark of 0.18. That's the second highest single season average on at least 150 carries since 2006, data courtesy of PFF. Charles also led the NFL in 2010 with a mark of 0.15, which is the 4th highest single season mark during that time period. Charles also finished 6th in the league in 2012, 7th in 2013, and 5th in 2014. In the first 3 years mentioned, he finished with a higher EPA per rush than his quarterbacks in Kansas City did on EPA per dropback. Additionally, Tej Seth, a former intern at PFF, came up with a rushing yardage over expectation model, similar to CPOE, or completion percentage over expectation. The short definition is that it uses down, distance, yard line, defensive alignment, and offensive line PFF grades to determine the number of yards an average running back would gain in a given situation. Since I'm citing it in this video, it should be unsurprising that Charles also dominated in this department. He once again led all rushers in those insane 2009 and 2010 seasons. His 1.47 mark in 2009 was the best charted during this 16-year stretch. Just think about that. Your average running back would have been expected to average 4.4 yards per carry in that 2009 Chiefs offense, and Jamaal Charles averaged 5.9. Simply absurd. He finished in the top 4 of the stat in each of his 5 starting seasons, 4th in 2012, 4th in 2013, and 2nd in 2014, going to show just how next level he was at creating yards and positive plays all on his own. Now let's take a look at how Charles fares when extrapolating out to this entire 2006 to 2021 period. Among rushers with at least 1,000 carries, only 4 running backs had a non-negative EPA per play: Derrick Henry, D'Angelo Williams, LaDainian Tomlinson, and Jamaal Charles, who more than doubled LT's second place mark. For his career, Charles also averaged 0.79 rushing yards per carry more than expected, which far exceeded Dalvin Cook's second place number. For context, just take a glance at this handy chart and tell me where your eyes are instantly drawn to. And even when accounting for age due to the fact that Charles retired early and didn't hang on long past his prime like Adrian Peterson, Charles still comes out on top. The last thing I want to touch on is similar work that Chase Stuart of Football Perspective has worked on. His rushing yards above expectation model uses Pro Football Reference data, so it goes back further in time. He used the league average yards per carry numbers for each season to calculate how much better or worse than average every player was. For example, the league average yards per attempt mark in 2010 was 4.21. Charles averaged 6.38, so he was 2.17 YPC above average. Considering he had 230 carries, at league average he would have been expected to run for 968 yards on the season, but he ran for 1467, meaning he added 499 rushing yards above average in total. At the end of his Kansas City campaign, when this study was done, he had produced 1,657 yards above average. This was the fourth highest total in NFL history, behind the usual names Barry Sanders and Jim Brown, and also Joe Perry. On a yards per carry differential, Charles ranked third in league history behind Ernie Cadell and Marion Motley. No matter how you shake it, Jamaal Charles was not only one of the best running backs of his era, but also one of the greatest in the history of the sport. Screw the hold that longevity has on Hall of Fame voters and NFL analysts in general. Charles was arguably top 3 at his position in 5 different seasons. Not many players in league history can say that. Not hanging on for a handful of extra average to below average seasons should not be a knock on a player. Join the movement. Put Jamaal in the hall.